Hello, g'day, and welcome to our Summer Hits series. Thanks so much for tuning into the show in 2024. If you're new here, a big welcome to you. And to all our listeners, I'm very grateful for you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, connecting with the content, and making this podcast a part of your year's journey. Our Summer Hits features the top 5 episodes of 2024, the ones that really struck a chord with you. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. This is number 4.
We're here to win, win, win.
Welcome to the Win-Win Evangelism podcast. I have a fascinating discussion for you today. We are talking about evangelism, the essential questions that churches must ask. And I'm talking with John Finkelde, who is a church consultant. John pastored for 30 years and has been consulting churches for the last 12 years. So he has plenty of experience and wisdom for us today. Welcome to you, John.
Tina, great to be with you and with all the listeners today.
Great to have you along, John. So 30 years of being involved at the head level of leading churches and 12 years consulting. Before I jump into these questions that we think churches should be asking now in this area of evangelism, just in the last 12 years of your consulting, John, how has the church landscape changed?
I think massively changed. I think the pandemic obviously changed everyone's life around the planet. So I think the whole online world has become far more in the face of church leaders, far more relevant. And I think also AI is playing a role. And in fact, I think AI in some ways will be a bigger change point than what the pandemic was for us. So I think it's changed massively in those two areas. And I think the third area of change would have been the increased regulation, compliance issues from government.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sure you're grappling with those as you are working with church leaders across our nation. Let's talk about a church in today. What are the big questions that you would, or is there one or two questions that you would lead with in a consultation with a church when they're talking about this whole area of outreach and evangelism?
I think you always start in a consulting sense in working with the church. You always start with where they're at, what's going on in their environment, in their context. So in terms of evangelism outreach, I'm asking them a few things of what they're doing in terms of reaching their community. How do they connect to their community? And then probably also very much what are they doing on the online and physical space to connect with people who visit. And people will visit their website or their social media before they actually visit the physical church. Probably I would say today in Australia, 80-90% of people would visit some form of online presence before the physical presence. So I really talk a lot to pastors about shaping up their online presence, especially their website, to be geared towards the person who's not in their church rather than the person in their church. Then also talk through about what's it like for a person when they come to church for the first time. Most people, when they go to a church first time, are nervous. So how can you lower those nerves? How can you make that connection with someone who may be going to church for the very first time in their life, who have no context, no understanding of the Christian faith at all? So what can you do to lower their nerves and make the connection with them?
Yeah, those are great questions to ask. Let me just go back to that great question about, what do we as a church have online where people make that connection first? How would you see that in terms of churches that you're consulting? Are churches more likely to be heading down, putting information on their websites for their people, or are there some really good things out there where people are genuinely having stuff on their website that would connect with non-Christians?
I think one of the things I say to pastors and church leaders about their website is normally I'll sit with them, pull it up on my phone and say, look, one, does it work on my phone? If it doesn't, then most people are going to come to your church website on the phone. Most of your church people connect through the email newsletters, the announcements on Sundays, unless there's something really special on the website. Most church people don't go regularly to their church website. So it's primarily there for visitors. So make sure when someone lands, they can find very easily and quickly, without scrolling, the Sunday service time and a Google map reference. At least a link, but preferably the actual map. So people can just click on their phone. Because people get up on Sunday morning, believe it or not, Tina, and Google church near me. They find a church in me and they struggle to find what time's the service, where is it, and they bounce out real quick. So I say, get those things in line, and a short video clip on the front page as well of the pastors preaching. So they've got a little bit of an insight into the church. Then the second thing I do is say, look at every page on your website and design every page to be for the outsider, not for the insider. So get rid of the our vision, our dreams, us, we, all those words. Get rid of them and have plenty of words that say you and your. And think about the unchurched person who's landing on your website. They don't, to be honest, they don't care about your vision. They're not really interested in your vision and what your values are. I mean, I just think, don't bother. Put it somewhere at the back end of your website if you're really keen, but write about their dreams, their vision, their hopes, their pain, their problems. Write about them. So when they read it, they go, this church understands me. This church, I connect with what they're saying because that's me. Whatever my frazzled state of life is that I'm desperately now seeking for a church, write for them. And so one way I do this, say, okay, let's look at all the words on your front page of your website, your homepage. How many times do you say us, we, and our? How many times do you say you and your? And if it's all us, we, and our, you're writing about yourself. Don't do that. Write about them. Write from their perspective and their angle. So there are a couple of ideas that I give them to kind of turn their website around, aimed at the person they're trying to reach.
Okay. Well, John, I think that sounds like you've just caused a lot of people a lot of pain.
Yes, I probably have, actually. It definitely happens when I'm with the pastor, and sometimes I'll do it in the leaders' meeting and they'll go, oh, actually. And I think when people see it, they realise we're writing this for us, not for them.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm just thinking of, a number of church sites that I've been on in the last few weeks, and I would say that they probably haven't answered those questions, which is really helpful. So what I'm also excited about is I feel like you've got a bit of a marketing hat, and that's a great word. I know it's not always received as a great word in the church world, but it kind of begs me to ask this question. Do you think that churches need to be a little bit more proactive in marketing in terms of reaching communities? How do you see that?
Marketing it's a funny word in church world, isn't it, sometimes? And I think marketing is the M word people don't want to use, but everybody's marketing their organisation, their business, their church, their club at all times, because marketing, just forget the word marketing, use the word communication. So what are you communicating through your website, through your newsletter, through all the mediums that you've got? What are you actually communicating to people? And I think churches should give some time and thought and some budget to thinking through what is our message? Who are we trying to reach? What are we actually saying to those people? That's all marketing is, really. And I think if you get beyond that kind of corporate, sort of worldly, secular feel of marketing into communication, all churches are into communication. What are you communicating to the people in your community who don't come to your church? Because if you really start to communicate well with them, then they're likely to hear your message, and that's what we're ultimately about, is to share Jesus, and that's our message that we want to get through to them.
Yeah, that's very good. This is such a great conversation. I'm glad we're having this conversation on the show today. Let's talk about, John, the church has been, say, existing for the last 10 years, and it has a number of what it would call evangelistic initiatives maybe already in place in the church that have been there, some of them there for a long time. What are the types of questions that you would be provoking the church leader to think about when you're looking at what's there already?
I definitely go into churches and have a look at some of their evangelistic endeavours, which may be it may be a special service, family fun day, Mother's Day, Christmas, Easter event that's aimed at people who don't normally come to the church. Or it may be a program like a dance class or a fitness class or a kindy group, play group scenario, a men's shed type sort of environment where people come onto the property for a purpose other than what the church normally provides, and at least make a connection with then the church building and the facility and maybe some of the people in the church. So what I do with the pastor is say, look, why don't we evaluate all those programs? Now, the programs which are geared around a Sunday service, all right, can we evaluate how many people come who don't normally come to church? Can we evaluate what happened to them when they came and what happened to them afterwards? Did they come back for a second visit? And collecting and collating that sort of data and evaluating it and really getting a handle on what's actually working. Because we may find out that, our big Christmas event that we run every year attracts 30% bump in attendance, but in reality, people don't come back in January, in February, and March the next year. So is that event worth doing? Well, you may then say, we're worth doing because we'll treat it as a pre-evangelism event, not an evangelism event. Okay, get your definitions right and aim for it right, and then know what you're achieving. And the same with your kindy groups and the play groups and the dance class environment. They're the real difficult areas because I find most churches, and our church over the years struggle the same. Most churches struggle to get a bridge going from that group into church, into a Sunday service, into a small group, into connecting with relationships. And I think, again, it's evaluating and going, we're putting a lot of budget, a lot of people, a lot of resources, endeavours into that play group. No one comes to Christ out of the play group. Okay. Are you going to call it pre-evangelism? Are you going to call it community connection? Are you calling it evangelism? Evaluate it. And maybe sometimes to actually go, this is not working for what we really want to do. Let's stop it. And sometimes I think you just need to go, end of the era, let's close the dance class. It's not working for the outcome that we're really doing, which is about bringing people to Christ and making disciples. But you really have to work out what your aim is. And if your aim is, we just want something that makes us feel good or gives us a connection to the community, great. As long as that's your aim, cool. But if it's not reaching people for Christ, then maybe it's time to rethink what you're doing with it.
I would imagine that would be a hard process, particularly if something's been in place for a long time and there's, for whatever reasons, what makes it difficult for pastors to maybe see the reality but then embrace a new direction? What is so difficult?
I think it is hard for all of us to face change and something that we've loved and enjoyed and has been fruitful in a way because it's, blessed the community. It's helped, say, mums. Let's talk about a play group. We'll keep it there. So it's helped mums. It's helped kids. It's really an avenue of connection to the community that's very real. So again, I think it is coming to a point, and this is what I do when I'm consulting. You don't come with a consultant's hard hat on and a wagging finger at people. You come and say, let's have a look at this from another side, another angle. Is that what you want this group to do? Is that what you want it to achieve? And that conversation can be difficult, but if it's done in the context of, hey, what are you trying to achieve here by having a consultant in? You're trying to achieve change. Let me be a catalyst for change with you. And then just gently leading churches and pastors. Because I pastored for 30 years, I know what it's like to sit in that hot seat of pastoring. So there's no way I'm telling people off or saying you have to do this. I just say, let's have another look at it. What do you want to do with it? And it may take a year or two to bring that change or to sharpen the evangelistic potency of that play group, which I think you can do. Don't think you have to shut it down, but you might have to. But another angle is, why not try something different to build the bridge to the church from the play group?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate your tone and your wisdom, and that's why we wanted to have you on the show. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Thank you for your feedback on how the podcast has been able to help you and your church be more effective in evangelism. In 2025, I'm really looking forward to helping more churches train and equip their congregations for evangelism. Please contact me if I can help support your church. It is hard, as a senior leader to ask the big questions in the first place. But then how do we move from here? That's, often takes time and courage and all of those things.
It does.
What type of questions would I ask if I was a church leader and I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, it's a whole new world that's out there? What things should I be asking myself?
I think a church leader, I think very much starting in the online space is who can help me with my website? And I think to raise a bit of money in your local missions budget, to go out and get a very good copywriter, someone who writes words for a profession, and look, it might cost you, say, $2,000. To raise $2,000, go out and spend that on your website to help you really frame up some magnificent wording. Now, you could pay someone $50 on Fiverr.com or Upwork, but I'm not sure you're going to get real bang for your buck out there. So then go and raise the money out of your local missions budget and get that reframing of your website into the right sort of way. So I think a good question for a pastor to ask is, where can I find a good copywriter? Where can I find someone help me with that language to frame it up in a different way? I think also a good question for pastors to ask is, if the bridge between the playgroup and the church is not working, what will work to connect the bridge? Now, I'm a huge fan of a whole thing called email devotionals, which I think, in fact, I was on a coaching call with a pastor today who's got a playgroup that's growing and it's wonderful. No one's coming to church out of it. I said, why don't you try some email devotionals? Just get people in the playgroup, give them the offer of signing up for some spiritual insights newsletter. Call it what you like to frame it for the mums, the dads in the playgroup, and sign them up and gradually build a relationship with them through some spiritual insights newsletter that you mail out once or twice a week. And over a period of months, people go, gee, I really enjoyed the wisdom of this person. And you can just gradually connect them to the fact that this is coming from the church. I don't think as churches we've explored enough the avenue of email devotionals, email spiritual newsletters for your unchurched person or your person who used to go to church. I was in a session this morning presented by a person who had a Catholic background. And I thought, there's a prime example of someone who's into spirituality, probably doesn't go to church anymore, but would be open to a spiritualities newsletter. You need a better name than that, but something that just gets them connected to your church in an online sense that you can build a relationship with them. I think these are sort of questions pastors should be asking is, what are some left field ideas that we should be doing in 2024? It's not 2010 anymore. We're in a different world, and I think we need to shape ourselves to that world.
Yeah, there's some practical applications there, John, which I just love. You're just speaking my language now. I love it, love it, love it. Every bit of me gets excited when you talk that language and give those type of applications. People seem to be a long way away from church these days, John, like the steps into church, so to speak, are a long way. Do you think that our measures of success of maybe what we thought was successful for before, do we need to ask some questions around that of how that even looks today, like considering it's such a longer journey for people to make?
I think it's a really great question, Tina. And one of the things I do in consulting is get pastors away from counting just your attendance and your money in the bank, and let's dive down into what really creates a healthy church. And there are some really simple metrics you can use in terms of measuring, success, measuring fruitfulness, because often I think 20 years ago, maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago, it was around, gee, we've got 400 people in the building, we must be successful. I think today, and also the fact that people are attending church, committed members are attending church less, I think that becomes a very challenging metric of success, because it'll beat pastors up when they go, gee, we didn't have 400, we only had 300 this week, or we didn't have 100, we only had 60. So I think pastors do need to use other metrics of success in terms of working out what is fruitful, what is healthy, measuring, I think, baptisms compared to attendance is a really good metric. I tell pastors aim for about 7% of your attendance on a Sunday. So if you average 100 people, baptize 7 people a year, 7 or 8 people, and that's a healthy number. I think you can measure the number of people in a church who are connected relationally in a group, because discipleship happens in small groups to a great degree. So I think there are other metrics like that I think are far better in terms of organizational health. And I think the challenge for all church leaders is, how do you measure spiritual health? How do you know if someone's spiritually healthy? And I think it's very hard to get a grasp on that. How do you know if someone's spiritual? Well, they pray and read their Bible. Good. That's great. That's a nice thing to do, but how loving are they? How joyful are they? How peaceful are they? How do you measure those things? And I think personally they're very hard to measure unless you're in a solid relationship with someone and talking through those issues. So I think pastors do have to work on, these are the things I can look at and measure fruitfulness. Some things I just have to do my job and trust the Lord with some of those outcomes because I cannot have any control over them.
Yeah, some great thoughts. But let's go back to this kindy idea, this kindy group that a church has got going, and we're trying to evaluate that. I don't think most people are trying to evaluate that group solely as did someone say yes to Jesus?
Yeah.
If we had that mindset, well, we'd close down every kindy group, to be honest. But what type of, if we talk about measures of success with that, what type of things would you be encouraging pastors to look at that's going on within those groups where the church is interfacing non-Christian people?
I would be measuring things like, does the pastor go into that play group regularly? So is the pastor known in that group as the pastor of the church? Because one of the ways that you can immediately lift that potency of evangelism in that group is, here's our pastor. And some people would say, what's a pastor? Is that, they don't understand even the word pastor. What's a pastor? Well, he's like the reverend, the vicar, the bishop of the church, whatever language will relate to the people. So I'd be measuring, how often does the pastor visit the play group? Are the people aware that the pastor is part of leading the church that actually runs the play group, that the play group is a program of the church? So I definitely would not keep the church hidden. Let the church be at the forefront of, this is a church program, this is a church thing. And then I would be asking also, how often are special occasions in the church that are relevant to non-church people, how often are they promoted within the group? How often is there an awareness in the group that there are programs, functions, events that people can come to? It might be a parenting course. It might be a workshop on marriage. It might be even a budgeting financial, but something that says, hey, the church is here to help you with your life. Might be on emotional well-being, whatever. So what sort of promotions are we doing? Then also, I think at a board and a team level in the church is to actually go, we're very happy this being a non-evangelistic connection to the community, and we'll leave it at that. If that's your goal, then I would say, great, tick that box. You've done that box. But if I was consulting with you, I'd be pushing a little bit harder and saying, well, what's the ultimate purpose of the church? Is it to run things that the community like, or is it actually to reach people for Jesus? So let's lift our game. So again, things like a spiritualities newsletter, making that available to people. In other words, creating little bridges that come across to the church feel and the church vibe in a way that it's very much at the forefront of the mums coming to the group, the dads coming to the group, that, hey, this is run by a church, and we have some great things that can help you with your life. So I think it's been very much on the front foot of evaluating, building the bridges. And you know what it's like. We've all come to Jesus through relationships over a period of time. Most people didn't get the lightning strike like Paul got on the road to Damascus. Most of us had relationships that over a period of time, we realized Jesus needed to be our savior. And I think playgroup can work exactly like that. But if you're not intentional about it, it will never, ever happen. And I think that's where some churches kind of go along saying, oh, this is great. And I'm a consultant will say, well, is it great? Really? What are we measuring great against? Let's have a look at it.
Absolutely. And I think that what springs to my mind as you're talking is those questions around pathways of where we're trying to lead people. Is that how you would see it? Just starting to ask questions of what's the pathway for people?
Human beings love footpaths. Find a footpath, we'll walk down it. Make it clear where you go from A to B. Here's a footpath, here's a direction. Great, we'll follow that. We are very sheep-like that scenario. So I think if you create a pathway for people to go, right, they're in the play group. All right, pathway next step might be the spiritualities newsletter. It might be going to a budgeting seminar or a workshop on parenting, or can be on anything related to toddlers and babies and kids and whatever, how to choose the right school. I mean, you can have all sorts of ideas, but what's the pathway? Have you actually got a big A3 sheet of paper and doodled out a pathway for these mums and dads in your playgroup? At very least, you want to create a pathway. Even if you struggle to get someone to point A on the pathway, at least have somewhere where you're aiming to move people. I think it's a great concept, Tina. Pathways are brilliant.
Well, thanks for the thoughts. I mean, that was just springing to my mind as you were talking. I think because people need so many more entry points, or it's just building those connections, isn't it? Once they come into that group that we may have going, it's like you're saying, having a pathways of where to from there. Where are we moving this community of people? Where maybe, John, 30 years ago, it might have been only 2 places, where it seems like to me that there needs to be a lot more of those touch points, so to speak, before we can reasonably, what we do expect of people coming to actually know Jesus. Has that moved significantly, or is that just something in my own imagination?
I would say, compared to, say, I'm older than you, Tina, so I'll go back 40, 50 years. I think compared back to 40, 50 years, I think the options are way more, hugely more available for churches to reach out to the community and not just expect it all to be done through people inviting friends. I think it's still a primary way, but there's different ways to build relationships. You and I have relationships with people around the globe we've never met face to face. I mean, you and I actually have never met face to face. We've only met through phone calls and connections like this.
And even in your own city, John.
That's right.
Even in your own city, we met on FaceTime and we were literally 10 minutes apart. That was hilarious.
That's right. So true. So I think the options today are brilliant and available. And I think churches, use a bit of your local missions budget to think differently with some email devotionals, with thinking through a copywriter for your website, with thinking through, how do we actually connect with the people out there that we're trying to reach? It's certainly, I think today, most of those relationships you have with people outside your church are not going to start face to face. Most of them are going to start on the internet. And I think we need to be stronger and better at making those relationships stick.
This has been a really challenging and thought-provoking interview, John. Really love it, love it, love it. So John's website is growahealthychurch.com, and I want to encourage you to connect with John there. Also in our show notes, we'll have those connections for you and all the social media spaces as well to stay connected to John, a great church consultant. So maybe you can suggest to your own church leaders that maybe John could be of a great service to your church. So this has been fascinating, John. I just feel like I need to hang up and I need to think about everything that you said and ask some great questions myself. So, John, thank you. It's been a great pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you for your time.
It's been great, Tina. Thanks so much for you and also for your podcast and for your listeners. It's been great being with you.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode from our Summer Hits series that runs throughout January. And get ready because we've got some incredible new episodes lined up for 2025. I can't wait to share it all with you. Until then, take care.
We're here